I've got 8:57.
No, then we're really early. Okay. Chris Blessing says he's shaved for this. I can't believe it. Big news. So yeah, we were out in front on this. The whole world's going online only, right? So First Pitch Forums, blazes this trail before anybody else. All the cool kids are doing it now.
Yep.
All the universities, I hear.
It's like what I'm doing all week and what all the industry drafts are doing, right, Ron?
Yeah. Tout Wars has moved online this weekend as well. We had to cancel all the live events. Yeah.
Crazy times.
Yeah, my niece is in I think 2nd or 3rd grade, and they're going to remote teaching next week too.
Wow. Yeah, but we've kind of been waiting for that at the K-12 level. I saw Seattle just went to that today. And my town just had its first reported case like 45 minutes ago. So who knows where this is all going. Good times. But that's not what we're here to talk about, thankfully. $8.59. Rod, you go to a game today?
No. I was supposed to go down to the Yankees versus the Marlins in Jupiter, but it's just been crazy with everything going on, and I just had a lot of catch up to do. So I had to pass on that.
It's the month of the year when I live vicariously through you in Florida.
And I'd sold all my tickets for this weekend's games, thinking I was going to be in New York.
So, yeah, sure.
So I'm not scheduled to go to a game now until, let's see, next Wednesday, the Mets and the Tigers.
I don't know. The secondary market might be kind of soft this weekend, though. You never know.
It's true. It's true. I was supposed to fly up to New York tomorrow, regardless whether or not Tout Wars was going on, and now I'm having second thoughts. So very conflicted whether I should be traveling.
Yeah, I'm still debating whether or not I'm going down to New York for the NFBC too. So, complicated decisions, and without getting too political, I feel like we don't have enough information to make the decisions.
Well, President Trump is having an address scheduled against us starting now.
Clearly, he did not know we were doing this.
Yeah, well, we should have let him know that.
The nerve.
So we'll have to find out what he says after we're done.
I bet you there'll be video of that available too.
I think so.
All right, let's fire this thing up.
Okay.
Ryan, give me the content slide. So yes, this is session number 2. Final session is Tuesday next week. We're going to have a lighter program for that. Just so you guys know, for next week, we'll schedule Tuesday's program. Maybe we'll fill half of it or so with topics, and then we will leave plenty of time for Q&A, and particularly focused on spring training developments, roster battles, positions, rotations. As we get deeper into the spring, some information starts coming into focus. So we saved a lot of the spring training relevant content for next week. So that'll be where we go next week. But we got a whole hour to get through tonight first. So things we're going to buzz through tonight. Brent and Ron are going to lead off with a little bit of a debate about how we should be ranking the top of the starting pitching pool and what criteria should be top of mind there. We're going to zip through some relievers who could be closing by June. This is a list provided by Doug Dennis, our bullpen analyst at HQ. Ryan Bloomfield will run through that for us. Dan Marcus is going to do rebound candidates who were from the last year's trash bin, who are who could be this year's treasures. Chris Blessing is going to give us 90 prospects who could explode. I'm going to cover sluggers to worry about if the ball is dejuiced, which, of course, is one of the great unanswered questions as we enter the season. I think we talked last week about how we will know that 2 weeks into the season, but we unfortunately will not know it on draft day. But here are some people who we might want to hedge against the possibility that the ball changes back. And then Ryan's going to give us some potential busts in the ADP top 50, some stayaways or draft with draft with caution, guys. So that's what we're going to zip through for probably 45 or 50 minutes here, and then we'll get into Q&A after that. One piece of feedback we did get from last week was that some people had trouble hearing or catching what the questions were in the Q&A session. So Ryan's got a mechanism where he's going to pop up the question on the screen so everybody can read it and be able to see what we're talking about before we answer it. So we'll try to do that a little bit better. We will try to have a recording tonight. We're pretty certain we're going to have that, actually. But with that, let's jump into it. Brent and Ron, you guys are first.
Re-ranking the top tier of the starting pitcher pool. This was something I noticed doing an article for the Athletic early this offseason. Here's a little chart here. Let's start with something that we're kind of familiar with. We've seen this charts in the Baseball Forecaster this year. It shows how the number of 200 inning starters has been in decline, rapid decline there. It's kind of plateaued over the last few years, but compared to just 10 years ago, it's just a fraction of what it was before. And this is caused due to the evolving way that Major League teams are handling their pitching staffs. But the thing is, these anchor arms, these 200 inning pitchers, they're really important to our teams. They provide quality and quantity innings to our bottom line. But here's the thing: in looking at this, the ratio categories, ERA and WHIP, that type of quality can kind of be found in lots of places up and down the draft board. Frontline closers, plenty of middle relievers. They provide these quality ratio categories that often exceed even what some of the best starters do. And you can kind of manage your pitching staff with the ratio categories. But when it comes to the counting stats, specifically strikeouts and wins, you need innings. And that's why these 200 inning pitchers are so valuable. It's kind of become like sort of a scarce commodity, like we look at some of the other stats. So I think that's the way we need to look at our pitchers, these 200 inning pitchers, as scarce commodities. But the ADPs are really not reflecting that. If we can switch to the next slide. Here are the starters going in the top 100 who are projected for at least 180 innings, and those who are also going to the top 100 projected for less than 180 innings. In some cases, far less. But many of them are still being drafted relatively high, and I think that's a mistake. The thing is, when we look at the inning pitch counts on the chart on the right, those playing time projections are kind of arbitrary because we don't know how much time a Justin Verlander is going to miss, or a Clevenger, or Chris Sale. We don't know how much time. Those numbers could be even lower potentially. And those inning shortfalls are going to be made up with primarily replacement level pitchers, which could negate a lot of the advantage you have by drafting these guys so high, especially in the ratio categories. So I think you want to focus on the guys who are giving you innings, and I think those make sense to draft high and maybe even push up a little bit above, your Clevengers, your Snails, your Snells, your Sales, who I think are going way too high for the amount of innings that they're giving you. That's my pitch.
I guess my counterpoint would be, because you don't exactly know just how hurt Justin Verlander is, or if Max Scherzer is gonna tweak something or not. Taking them or some of those guys on the right-handed column high, their innings would just as easily be higher than that. Yes, it's a little more risky, obviously, and I think you need to kind of, you need to be kind of smart about it. But I think that they're priced, pretty much where they are, and I think that if going in, you're kind of aware of kind of some of the middle tier starters that give you volume, that have guys that have been kind of mid-level performers, starting pitchers, but have not taken that step up, and just being okay with the collecting some of those guys for your strikeouts, your, kind of your Jake Odorizzi's, your Kyle Hendrickses, and all that. I think that you can just as easily, pad your counting stats that way. And yes, maybe you're risking it a little bit with, with Snell or Paddock, but maybe they pitch more and their innings and strikeouts go even higher.
Yeah, there's a common refrain that they always ask. Any pitcher, any player is draftable given a certain discount. How low would they have to go in order for you to be comfortable drafting them? And my response to that is, there are a lot of pitchers out there, and you don't even have to draft these guys at all. Scott Pianowski of Yahoo Sports probably puts it best when he says that, why invite injuries onto your team? They will find you during the season anyway. So why start out with a flawed roster? And that's kind of my approach. Is I would rather, especially at the high end of the pitching, I'd rather have a foundation that's less risky and with innings that I know I can count on, rather than having to play games and try to figure out what I'm going to get with a Snell or a Sale or a Verlander.
Yeah, I mean, although then you do kind of miss out sometimes on not even kind of the injury guys, but some of the in this list, for instance, like sure, Chris Paddock is only projected for 174 innings pitched, but he has an A health grade. He's just outside the top 50. There's no reason, he's young enough. There's no reason why he couldn't end up going 190 innings. And, obviously, given what good control he has and all that, his ratios should be strong and his counting stats can be strong. I mean, so you have players like, Zach Greinke last year or Aaron Nola in 2018 who, were further down on the ADP list, but actually returned, first round value. And yes, those are career years, and perhaps that's the outlier. But heck, you get one of those on your roster, and it sets you up really nicely for the year.
Well, I guess we have different approaches to handling the top pitchers. We can agree to disagree.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, for sure. And this is Ryan. First up here, it's really, if you hit on that early pitcher, if you go an early pitcher, that's going to make or break your season. Because I mean, to Brent's point, the number of sheer injuries you've seen this spring training is just crazy. I'm really interested to see how that plays out in drafts here. In the second round, for example, as your Scherzers, your Verlanders go down the board, what's going to happen with that next tier of guys, those Glasnows, those, Luis Castillo types? Are those guys going to get pushed up? And very interesting. Risk reward. If you hit on these aces, you're so far ahead of the game, especially with the ball last year. The average ERA for pitchers was very bad. So that gap between pitchers and aces was pretty high. So any final parting shots between you two before we
no, we're friends. We're friends.
That's right.
No parting shots.
Yes, that's right.
No parting shots. I guess you won't see each other face to face in New York this weekend.
No,
we'll have to leave it at that. But
yeah, okay.
Very good, guys. We'll kick you off, and we'll see you both back on here for the Q&A at the end.
Okay.
Good.
Cool. All right. Next up, by our crack bullpen analyst, Doug Dennis. I'm going to be presenting on Doug's behalf, the closer of the HQ writing staff. Doug's been doing great work for us for a number of years. He's going to give you all a bunch of relievers who could be closing by the end of June. As we know, and to preface this a little bit, we had the stat that stuck out to me is just how many different closers are getting saves and got saves last year. There are the that concept of fractured bullpens is really more alive than ever with guys who are splitting roles. There's less of that kind of, firm ninth inning role and guys that are locks to get 30 plus saves. So this is really important. I mean, bullpens are more fluid than they ever have been. So here are 5 names that Doug provides. And again, we will, just like we did with the first session, we'll give you our speaker notes as well as these slides. So you don't need to scramble and write down all these names, but Scott Oberg feels a little bit weird to be recommending a Colorado closer. But Scott Oberg has actually pitched really well in Colorado the last 2 years. He's got a sub-3 ERA each of the last 2 seasons in Colorado's bullpen. And it was a little bit of a surprise to me that Oberg will not start the season as the Rockies closer. The guy who is Wade Davis. And if I could put money on Wade Davis not being in the closer role by June, I would lay that down pretty easily. So there's a lot of risk in front of Scott Oberg. I think that role is going to open up, and Oberg has the skills to at least be pretty good and the results. He's shown that he can tame Coors Field. The sub indicators, at least in a small sample, he can tame Coors Field. The sub indicators look pretty good. The velocity is good, sub 4 xERAs. So the skills are there. He's not a dominant elite closer, but somebody who's going. His ADP right now, Oberg's ADP is 282, and that's with a lot of the preseason assumption that Oberg would be the Colorado closer. So he's really going around 300 recently in drafts. Next up in Seattle, Dan Altavilla. So Seattle's really interesting. Kind of the consensus is that Matt McGill and Yoshi Hirano are the kind of 1A and 1B for the closer role out there. Hirano's never really been a closer, so we'll see how he does first year in a new city. And McGill's been battling shoulder problems and hasn't really thrown much at all in the spring. So he really just started throwing, I believe, last week. So your kind of third choice there, and someone who's going, extremely deep in drafts, is Altavilla. And he's been, pretty decent in the role. We're projecting Altavilla for a 365 xERA. And so the skills are there to be at least competent for Seattle. Again, not your kind of elite closer, but we're also projecting 114 BPV. So Altavilla is somebody who is not getting drafted at all and has some value there if McGill stays hurt with that shoulder problem and Hirano proves that he can't close, or if Seattle doesn't even want him to close. So there's a lot of paths for Altavilla to be the Mariners closer. Next up, Will Harris, who's been kind of shunned so far this draft season. I think a lot of it's because of that World Series performance. But Will Harris, and I looked this up before the broadcast, I definitely see what Doug's talking about here. Will Harris is, for those of you who are familiar with Baseball HQ's metrics, the base performance value, or BPV. Will Harris has had a 150 plus BPV, which is a really closer-worthy elite level BPV in each of the last 4 seasons. The only other 2 closers to do that are Aroldis Chapman and Ken Giles. So Ken Giles, Aroldis Chapman, and Will Harris are the only ones who have proven that they can sustain in a volatile reliever market, that they can be elite. So Will Harris, ahead of him is Sean Doolittle and Daniel Hudson. Doolittle, when he's healthy, can be really good, but that hasn't been very often the past few years. And same with Daniel Hudson, really. I mean, Hudson was really key for the Nationals in their playoff run last year, but has not shown that type of ability for any extended period of time. So Will Harris is the best, I would say, the best reliever. And we're projecting Will Harris to be the best reliever in Washington's bullpen. And if the stars align there, you're getting a potential top 10 closer if he can snag that role. So Will Harris, Ty Buttrey for the Angels is another one that Doug lists. So he's Buttrey's the backup to Hansel Robles, who had a pretty good year last year for the Angels, but we're projecting Robles with a 99 BPV, which in these days is kind of like league average, a xERA over 4. So we don't really, love the skills of Hansel Robles. Ty Buttrey, in contrast, has a 350 projected xERA and a 126 BPV. So better skills, doesn't have the role. That means he's going to be really cheap in drafts. Last but not least, Aaron Bummer. in Chicago. So Aaron Bummer's kind of interesting. He doesn't have the elite strikeout upside, but the guy can get ground balls, 68% ground ball rate. And, who knows what the 2020 ball will be. But if you can keep it on the ground, it doesn't really matter what that ball is going to be in 2020. Ahead of Bummer in the White Sox pen is Alex Colomé, who is kind of a proven closer, but getting up there in terms of mileage and years. And we're projecting over a 4 expected ERA for Colomé and a double-digit BPV, so not even hitting 100 there. So Bummer is somebody, even though he is left-handed, that is a consideration here. Bummer might be kind of a situational guy. There's a risk of that. But if Colomé falters, and the skills say that he might, Aaron Bummer is available and not very pricey at all in drafts. And then Doug just gives a list again. We'll provide this as part of the package for first pitch, but just a couple quick names that really jump out of me with these elite skills. Matt Barnes. So Matt Barnes had a chance to close for Boston last year. Couldn't quite get it done, but the strikeout upside is excellent. The skills are excellent. He's behind Brandon Workman, presumably in Boston's pen, who does have some walk issues. So there's a path there. Notice Cody Allen, a proven closer in the past, now with Texas. Jose Leclerc's the closer there, but he was booted from the role early last season. That could easily happen again. And then the other one, and I might butcher the pronunciation here, but James Karinchak for Cleveland is really skilled and behind Brad Hand, who really struggled at the end of last year, battled arm fatigue in September. So take a look at these guys as well. I just want to highlight a few that Doug provided. So again, as we know, given the volatility of the closer roles, people who are named opening day closers are not a good bet to end the season in that same role. So check those out. I'm going to transition now and bring Dan Marcus up to the stage. Dan, if you could raise your hand. We've got a bunch of people in the lobby, so it'll be a lot easier to find you there. And here we go. And Dan's going to present on last year's trash, a.k.a. rebound candidates from a bad 2019. So, Dan, I'll let you take it from here.
Appreciate it, Ryan. Yep. Happy to be here with everybody tonight. And as Ryan said, I'll be discussing some bounce back candidates during my bit of the presentation. Tried to hit on some players around the diamond, as well as a few bounce back arms. So trying to cover a bunch of positions for everybody. We'll start in Toronto with catcher Danny Jansen. He displayed a solid combination of ability to make contact and make that hard contact last season, despite an overall disappointing campaign. 77% contact rate, 114 HCTX. Also displayed some power upside with his 78 PX, showing that there is some upside there with a 97 XPX paired with that. He's also hitting well in spring. Through Monday's games, he's slashing 429, 529, 1071, and he struck out just once. All the normal caveats go with that spring training performance, but definitely still worth noting. And if that wasn't enough to convince you of his potential to bounce back, he also received the upside tag in the Baseball Forecaster this season. Moving on, we have Jesus Aguilar, who will get a fresh start after really crashing back to earth after a breakout 2018 performance. His playing time should be safe at first base until Lewin Diaz is ready for the show, a prospect in the Marlins farm system. Here again with Aguilar, similar to Jansen, we have a gap in his PX, which was an 83 last year, and his XPX, which is a 106. So again, we see a gap in that power potential there and what was actually produced on the field, which makes him a nice bounce back candidate. One thing I would be looking for early in the season, if I was counting on Aguilar to produce, would be his ability to get the ball in the air. During his breakout 2018 season, he posted a 35% ground ball rate. Last year, that mark jumped up to 42%, not something you want to see from someone you're counting on to produce for power. Another potential power bounce back candidate is Travis Shaw. He really just suffered a catastrophic dip in his contact rate last season. He has a 73% contact rate for his career, but that dipped all the way down to 61% last year, making his X stats really, really poor. But he's 30 years old, so it's not, while maybe not in his prime anymore, his skills shouldn't have just vanished like that. Again, a change of scenery candidate here. We'll also have multi-eligibility, which is something to consider in the deeper formats. So he is a solid candidate, though it is worth noting that the spring returns in this case aren't so good. He struck out almost at a 50% rate in 13 of his 27 spring plate appearances. So that is not what you want to see if you're counting on a bounce back. Maikel Franco, this is a change of scenery, pedigree kind of combination bet here. But there's a bit more to it in his profile, which, maybe isn't something that's come up frequently this offseason. For the first time in his career, he reached a 40% fly ball rate, and he followed that with an increase in his launch angle on StatCast. So those things kind of are backed up with each other. His increase there was kind of masked by a loss of playing time with the emergence of Scott Kingery in Philadelphia last season. So if you look at his expected home runs and other metrics of that sort, nothing really jumps out. But if you look at his playing time, his plate appearances, his at-bats, you'll see that those are on a steady decline. That shouldn't be the case with the Royals, where he should be locked into regular playing time. And if he can keep that change in skills, he could be a surprise, decent source of power. One of my favorites this year is Harrison Bader. We talk about the scarcity of speed. That's something that's come up throughout. You don't want to just get speed-only players. Harrison Bader is a perfect candidate for late in the game who brings that power-speed potential combination. There's a spike in his fly ball percentage last year, a 141 XPX combined with a 142 speed score. Those two things combined, again, here we have the upside tag in the forecaster for a 2020 season, and those two metrics kind of paint that picture for you. There is also some concern here as well, the lack of contact, and the Cardinals have a number of not necessarily inspiring options in the outfield, but they have a number of options in the outfield that could limit his playing time. The hope would be that Bader gets on the field because of his defense and then shows enough quickly with those skills that we talked about to make his performance translate for both the Cardinals and for fantasy managers alike. The final hitter we have is Jurickson Profar. A lot of his contact and plate discipline skills remained intact last season. He hit 218, terrible average, obviously, but had a 277 expected batting average, which kind of goes back to those skills and shows that those skills were still intact. Not tremendous upside with either power or speed, but chips in both categories. So again, a late game, late draft play for potential at least three decent categories of production. The one word of caution with Profar is a switch to the National League for the first time in his career, an improving Padres lineup with the emergence of some younger players and the addition of Machado last offseason will push Profar down in the lineup. He's currently projected to bat sixth, but if he gets off to a slow start and if he continues to get playing time, if he slips further down in the order, there could be a pretty big impact on his counting stats, which would hurt his overall value. Transitioning over to some pitchers, we have a few candidates here as well. Carlos Martinez, there were rumors all offseason about his switch from a bullpen closer role to a starting role. Miles Michaelis injury that will keep him out for the beginning of the season, likely clinched, that Martinez will transition back to a rotation role. More importantly, Martinez appears healthy at the moment. He touched 94 miles an hour in his second start of the spring. He wasn't sitting there. He was sitting in the low 90s, but the fact that he could touch 94 that early in the spring is a promising sign that he is healthy, and he was, one of these hyped aces that were discussed in the first part of this presentation a few years ago. Not that he'll return to that form, but he does have, again, the pedigree and the results in the past to be a bounce back candidate. Dylan Cease, maybe a bit too young to be considered a true bounce back candidate, but here we saw some hype based on pedigree and a disappointing major league debut. But he did work on his mechanics this winter. He talked about rotating too much on the front side of his body while he was pitching, causing his fastball to cut too much. Some of those control problems and issues that plagued him throughout his debut. So he's been working on that, and we saw teammate Lucas Giolito last year talk about some of the changes that he made in his delivery, and we saw what that could do. So with that in mind, Cease jumps out. There's been mixed results for him in the spring. He's had 2 solid starts and 1 where his struggles with command showed up again. So this is a bit of a bet on pedigree and his ability of just his raw skills and ability to really emerge based on that prospect pedigree. Finally, Freddie Peralta. Suddenly he has a path to the rotation. He kind of looked as if he was on the outside looking in for a rotation role due to, again, some uninspiring additions in the Brewers rotation, but additions nonetheless that seemed to push him out of the rotation. But the Eric Lauer injury seems to have cleared a path for Peralta to potentially claim the 5th starter role in Milwaukee. Another concern beyond just the volume of pitchers ahead of him was his repertoire. He had basically relied solely on his fastball, which seemed to have him destined for a bullpen role. But he has been working on a slider this offseason and has been throwing it in his spring outings, combined with a dominant Winter League performance. He seems to be trending back up as we head into the season and could be in for a bounce back season in a starter's role.
All right, cool. Great stuff, Dan. I think it gets lost on a lot of analysis out there that we focus so much just on 2019 that it's important to take kind of a longer view approach. I know for those of you attending, you've been HQ subscribers for a while. Ron Chandler had the extreme regression drafting, basically targeting guys who were last year's trash or showed a track record before 2019. Kind of like so. Really interesting stuff. Appreciate it. Is that a pirate shirt you got on there?
Yeah, gotta have it on while I can. I don't think it's gonna last too long when the season hits. So
any rebound pirates on there. Wanted to make sure. It could be another rough year. Yeah, man, appreciate it. And I'll take you down now, and we're gonna pivot a little bit to the minor leagues. We go down on the farm with Chris Blessing. And where is Mr. Chris? Chris, if you could raise your hand. You probably already have your hand raised. Raise it higher. That's not a button on here. So I found you.
What's up? Yeah, what's up?
All right, man. Take it away.
All right, man. So tonight we're talking about 9E prospects. So for those not familiar, 9E prospects are our most speculative prospects. Essentially, there's a chance an elite fantasy performer. However, the chances of becoming an elite performer is about 10% at this point in their development. So we've got 5 9E prospects to look at. And each of them has a very interesting story about how they got to become a 9E prospect in MLBA this year. The first one's the most well-known. And if you've been following along first-year player drafts, the experts all have Jason Dominguez usually as the number 1 prospect that they take in those type of drafts. And there's good reason for it. And you might say, why do we have him as a 9E prospect? Well, essentially, and with all international prospects, including Pena with the Royals and Marte with the Rangers and Polson with the A's, we don't have really good footage on them. Essentially, I had Jason Dominguez's profile. We had one video. Scouts hadn't seen him for, I don't know, almost 18 months because the Yankees had a signed agreement and weren't showcasing him before he signed. So he has yet to make a pro debut. I saw some video yesterday that he faced Nick Pivetta in an intra-squad game. There is nothing about that beyond that. We're talking about a 5-tool prospect here with reported finish around this game. Once again, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm going to assume it is. Has received lofty comparisons to current MLB players, such as Yasiel Puig for his athleticism, Miguel Cabrera for his hit and power ability, and even legendary players. And maybe this is a little bit of the Yankee aura, but I've heard Mickey Mantle comps from different scouts. And so, like, we're talking about possibly a generational talent here. He has a sweet short stroke with natural fly ball swing tendencies, has advanced feel for the barrel, and launches bombs effortlessly. Baseball America had video of him in extended spring training in the Dominican. And his only at bat, he hit a home run, and then the game got called. So, like, I mean, this guy's a switch hitter. I mean, we're looking at a possible stud here. As for the second guy on this list is another guy that we really haven't seen. But I had the Mariners farm system for MLBA, and Novi Marte got some buzz. Last year, there was a lot more information on the prospects before they signed. He signed in 2018. The big issue there were some swing deficiencies. And while some of them still remain, it seems like he's making more effort of having a cleaner swing plane. He's athletic. He's toolsy, power hitting middle infielder. Like I said, he made a pro debut in the Dominican Summer League. He's probably coming stateside. He's expected to fill out his frame. Right now, he's playing shortstop, likely a corner infielder, probably third base. He has the arm for it. And he also has the range. And really what I like about him from the videos I've seen from the scouts that I've talked to is that he does a really good job of incorporating his lower half, generating power. His trajectory is naturally geared to fastball, to fly ball contact. And it's a power-driven hit tool. When I say a power hit tool, essentially that means that he is looking to drive the ball, to the gaps and take advantage of his power to maybe make up a little bit for lacking hit tool. Third on the list is Brennan Davis, and he's kind of like a questionable 9E. He's somebody who could have been a 9B. I think I wasn't the one that scouted him for our book, but like he kind of took the baseball world by storm, really. Wasn't supposed to be in full season ball last year. Had a great extended spring training. Just waiting for a short season assignment. Somebody got hurt. Another guy got hurt. It's Brennan Davis's turn. And he hit single A really well. We're talking about a two-sport prospect in high school. Basketball was the sport that he was focused on. Had some low major Division I scholarship offers. Ended up realizing baseball was his path forward. He made mechanical changes this last offseason, I should say. Basically turning a long limb swing into shortened up version of that. He still has some work to do with his hitting, but he did show some advanced hitting skills and ability to make in-game adjustments. The swing is geared towards solid plate coverage. You'll hear about guys cutting off the plate, and I'm going to say a lot of power hitters in the minor leagues, that's what they do. This is a guy that's a power hitter that can hit it to all fields, has natural strength. Like this guy right here is, we're talking Dominguez is the top guy on this list. Brennan Davis is probably number 2. There's probably not that closeness, but like it's a legit thing. Moving on to the pitching, Luis Medina. He's a guy that's kind of, as an evaluator, you don't like to scout these guys. I mean, high stuff. We're talking about a double plus fastball, an elite fastball, actually. A double plus potential with his curveball, which is kind of a tight, almost like a slider, but he calls it a curveball. And a above average changeup. But the thing is, and also the delivery is very athletic and he repeats well, but until this season had zero command. Actually, until July had zero command. And then July, something clicked. So like his last 10 games, he looked like the prospect everybody hoped he would become. But here's the thing. 2 months worth of good pitching doesn't make up for all those seasons of, kind of just being wild. So that's why he ended up on the 9E list. So if he continues with this second half breakout, we're looking at a potential top 50 fantasy prospect and a pitcher with an electric arm, good athleticism, and a very solid delivery. The final guy on this list is Daniel Espino, and he is a Cleveland Indians prospect. And he was just drafted 2019 out of a Georgia prep school. And kid has electric stuff, advanced command, but he kind of fell in the draft to the 24th pick because some of the teams were concerned with his delivery. He has a long arm action. So essentially most guys come up like this. He goes all the way around. And even though he has good command, there's some worry, especially like with something like his changeup developing, but there's also worry that the command might falter. There's while he has a clean injury sheet, they're a little concerned about that. But if you watch him, his lower half is near perfect. Advanced mechanics with his lower half. Gets great extension. And, really and truly, this is the Indians' job to kind of calm down the arm action. If they do, this is a really fantastic pitcher. So, we got a kid that's, throwing 98, 100 miles per hour with a tight slider and a changeup that might be something. He also throws in the curveball, too. So, of these 5 guys, all of them are guys that could very well pop. We had other 9E prospects that we considered, but this group right here is probably the best of those 9E prospects.
All right, great stuff, Chris. I got a couple comments.
Okay.
During the last transition, do I sound good? If everyone can raise their hand, I just want to make sure I'm not feeding back.
You sound better than you did before.
Okay.
You
Cool.
sounded like a robot that was about to run out of oil or something. I don't know.
I don't want to be a robot who runs out of oil. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. People are raising their hands. So awesome. One thing I'll just add, Chris, to your 9E presentation is anyone who has a minor league baseball analyst, please read Chris's essay on the 9E prospects. He goes into a lot of detail on not just what a 9E is, since kind of what he talked about, but just going into the history of some of those guys. Very fascinating ceiling, floor, risk, reward types. So I would highly recommend, if you guys have not checked that out. Chris nailed that one. So.
Well, thank you. And it is it's a pleasure to be on here. Thank you guys for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem, man. All right. But you're off. You're out of here.
Yes.
All right. Next up is Ray, I believe. Yes. Okay. Ray, if you could raise your hand as well. Here you come. All right. You're on, Ray.
Hey, Ryan, you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Cool. Thank you, sir. All right. I'm going to run through some sluggers to worry about if the ball is not the so-called happy fun ball of 2019. Dave Adler put this slide together for us, and I'll run through 5 names here. Maybe we'll have a little fun along the way. First one is Alex Bregman. And if you eyeball the list here, we start off with 2 Astros. So let's talk about Bregman and Gurriel and get our trash can jokes out of the way. Bregman, trash can jokes aside, is a hell of a hitter. But even if you go back to this time last year and think about what we were expecting from him, even though I think his ADP had crept up into the first round at that point already, but we were not expecting the 41 home runs. We didn't really see him as that kind of hitter. He was more of a 325-15 kind of guy. He's got fantastic control of the strike zone, although that helps that you might know when the slider off the plate is coming and can lay off of it. But the 40 home runs were just not something we put in his profile at that point. In fact, the expected home run metric that we introduced in the Baseball Forecaster this year showed that of those 41 home runs, we only expected 23 of them to actually be home runs based on the launch angle and exit velocity of those balls. And sure, maybe that's got something to do with the ballpark in Houston, the Crawford boxes, etc. Maybe he's just sort of tailored his swing to that. Maybe it helps when you know what's coming as far as pitches. But either way, there's some concern there. We didn't, I certainly wouldn't bank on 40 home runs again, and I think our projection might not even get to 30. I think we're around 28, 29 right now. Another point on him is his average home run only went 382 feet, whereas the MLB average is right around 400. So that's another, and that's also not supported by his barrel rate, which sort of ties into the expected home run metric too. So bottom line is, the 41 home runs from Gurriel from Bregman were way out of line, and even if we give him a free pass on the trash can banging, he's a very, very good hitter, but not necessarily a 40 home run hitter, especially without the happy fun ball. Teammate Yuli Gurriel is much the same story. He was the one who, when we were writing the Baseball Forecaster back in the fall, actually had us go back to Eric Foramonte, who did the research on expected home runs, and said, hey, can you look at Gurriel again? This can't actually be right, because he hit 30 home runs last year. The expected home run metric burped out a number of 13 expected home runs for him. Eric pulled the data for us, showed it to us, and it was right. Similarly, another metric you could look at, his power index, and metric we've had at Baseball HQ for a long time, was 113, which is above average, but his expected power index, which is the check on that, was only 79. So that's 20% below league average and a long way from the 13% above league average that he actually showed us. He hung up a 16% home run per fly, but we were really only expecting 7%. Same thing as Altuve with the barrels. Same thing on Altuve with a trash can, and it helps. Maybe you hit home runs more if you hit a home run on a 3-2 pitch if you knew not to lay off the if you knew enough to lay off the 2-2 slider in the dirt because somebody bagged on a trash can for you. So concerned about both of these guys. Let's leave it that way. Let's move away from the Astros. Next guy, Manny Machado. Certainly a solid power profile, but last year's power regression was really pretty expected just based on the move from Camden Yards to Petco via Dodger Stadium, but still 32 home runs last year, but only 26 expected. And if the ball is a little more moderated this year, he's still stuck in Petco, and we should be worried about his ability to get back to that 30 home run level again. Staying on the West Coast, Jock Peterson, interesting case this year with the trade that didn't happen with the Angels. I was actually pretty fired up about the possible move to the Angels, really for both Peterson and Stripling. It never happened, but the right field in Anaheim with since they changed that park 2 or 3 years ago has actually become pretty friendly for left-handed power. We'll never know now, it seems. But, really big year he had for the Dodgers last year. It seemed like he was leading off every day against right-handed pitching and homering virtually all the time. He had 36 home runs, but again, we only had the 26 expected home runs. That was mostly fueled because he had a pretty insane 26% home run per fly going against a 19% expected home run per fly. So balls were clearing the fence more often than they should have, despite average exit velocity, launch angle, home run distance. All those metrics really just said 36 home runs way out on a limb. Now he's got the double-edged sort of the combining negative factors of we're expecting that home run rate to regress. And since he's still with the Dodgers, that's a very crowded outfield and a very team pretzel sort of thing going on, a really deep team. He's going to have to hit to even stay in the lineup against right-handed pitching. Now that Betts and Bellinger are probably 2/3 of the outfield and they're trying to make room for Lux, Muncy has to spend more time on the infield, and Seager's healthy and Turner's healthy, at least to start the year. Maybe some of that eases up in season, but right now, there are so many capable bats on that team that we can't even just ink Peterson in for the 70% playing time that the 450 at bats that you expect just on starting every day against all right-handed pitching. He might, and even when he does get the start, he's also probably pretty likely to get either pinch hit for in a platoon situation or for defense. So, 400 at bats might be, on the high side of our expectation, and he's going to have trouble matching last year's home run output, both in terms of how well he drives the ball and how much he plays. Last guy, Gleyber Torres, and we'll make jokes here about, if he misses any games against the Orioles, I think he had half his home runs against the Orioles last year. And if he doesn't get fat on them, then maybe not. But another run at 40 home runs might be out of the question for really most of the same reasons. He had 38 last year, a bonkers breakout season, but only 31 on the expected metric. And for the usual reasons, his home run per fly was a couple of ticks above what we expected. His PX was above his XPX. Yankee Stadium, still a good place to hit. AL East, certainly a lot of good places to hit. So not a place where we expect him to go in the tank, but we do think he was out over his skis a little bit last year. And as a result, we got to temper expectations a little bit this year. So 5 guys to potentially be worried about if the ball starts staying in the park a little more often. Thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, will the ball be dejuiced? We don't know, and that got brought up last year. I kind of took, in my latest speculator column, I took the opposite approach. Is not only is it the ball is dejuiced, but what if the seams on the ball, which really was what that juicing is, what does that mean for pitchers? So I looked at a bunch of pitchers who their secondary pitches kind of lost effectiveness last year because I used Masahiro Tanaka as the example. He said he couldn't really grip the ball. Zach Eflin called it a cue ball. So it kind of works both ways.
It's really tough, as the guy who does the projections, there's enough variables we don't know about already, and you got to throw in, things that's elemental to the game is what kind of ball are we going to use, let alone, changes to park factors and, a new stadium in Texas and guys changing teams and, figuring out playing time. There's a million variables, and now we can't even have a constant, okay, we know what the ball is going to be anymore. It's just kind of maddening.
Absolutely. To tie it back to that last presentation, it kind of makes these established major leaguers more of the 9E variety.
We're all 9E.
We're all 9E. More ways than one. Anyway, thanks, Ray. I'll knock you down for a little bit, and then we'll bring you back up for Q&A here in a few.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Last but not least, I'm going to run through these pretty quickly because I want to leave some time for Q&A as much as we can. So potential busts in the ADP top 50. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm going to lean on Ron's research that he did for The Athletic last year and that he put in the forecaster intro this season. Is just the bust rate of these early picks and really throughout the draft. Is about 45% bust rate for those first 5 rounds of 15-team leagues, and Ron called a bust as a player who returned more than a 4-round loss of value compared to his ADP. So that was pretty alarming at how bad the market is at drafting. But anyway, here are my potential busts in the ADP top 50. So I just praised Ron for his research there. I'm going to go against him a little bit. For those of you who were here last week, Ron mentioned Fernando Tatis as a potential top 5 pick this time next year in 2021. I can actually, totally see that upside in Tatis's range of outcomes. But I'm a very conservative drafter in the early rounds. I want to get that floor, and Tatis has really 3 things going against him. Really playing time. He's averaged 87 games the last 2 seasons. Not ready to call Tatis injury prone. He's only 21 years old. but how can you hold up over a full 162 games? The plate skills, I think a lot of the hit rate or BABIP with Fernando Tatis was just out of this world last year, and hit 317, but beneath that was a 67% contact rate. So could very well sustain a high BABIP or a high hit rate, but I don't see anywhere near 300 again. And then the home runs. So Fernando Tatis actually had a higher homer to fly ball rate of 32% than an actual fly ball rate. That's really rare. So Fernando Tatis hit just a 31% fly ball rate. I don't see a 32% homer to fly sticking. So for those reasons, I think Tatis is pretty risky despite the monster ceiling. And he's going late first round, early second round. Next up, Adalberto Mondesi. I had Mondesi's box in the forecaster, and I just summed up that range of outcomes with my upside and downside tag at the end of that box. So I tagged Mondesi with an upside of 60 steals, which he could even exceed. But I also tagged him with a downside of hitting 240 and hitting 10 home runs. And especially in this day and age of you need to gobble up as much power as you can, taking on a Mondesi with those shoulder questions, he's coming off-season shoulder surgery, could really set you back in power. And that's even if he hits on that 60 stolen base upside. Next up, Pete Alonso. He's kind of been a popular fade amongst analysts thus far, but the ADP with Pete Alonso is still really high. He's going around like the 30th pick in drafts. My biggest thing with Alonso is just sheer regression. So I put a tweet out about this a little while ago, but Alonso is one of 5 hitters in the last decade to hit over 50 home runs in a season. Alonso just happened to do it his rookie year. That cohort, the other 4 guys who hit 50 plus homers, the following year, they hit just 26, 27, 38, and 43 for an average of 33 home runs the following season. So you tack that power regression on along with kind of the league adjusting to Pete Alonso in the second half last year. He had a 250 expected batting average with a 68% contact rate. I think there's some pretty legit batting average risk in addition to the power regression. And then finally, Ketel Marte. You're buying someone who is coming off a career year and had a long track record of just mediocre performance. So Ketel Marte's highest value before 2019 earned value for a season was $14, and that was in only leagues. So the track record with Marte is there, and you're not paying for a repeat of 2019 per se, but even he's going in like the 3rd or 4th round, and you're still paying for a lot of that last season to stick. And at the end of the year last season, Ketel Marte was hampered with back problems. He missed the last 2 weeks of the season. How sure are we that those back problems are just gone and won't come back again in 2020? Everybody has injury risk, but taking an early round pick on somebody who could not finish last season because of back issues, something that can definitely recur, is just another notch against Ketel Marte. So hate to end it on a negative note, but avoiding those landmines early in drafts is absolutely paramount to building a strong team. So with that, we're going to bump this up to Q&A. So what I'm going to do, get your questions in, and I'll see them as we come. And as I see the question, I'll publish it. And we've already got a number of questions already coming in. So we'll try and keep the responses brief. I'm going to bring Ray, Brent, and Ron back up on the stage and cut the slideshow. Here comes Brent. Here comes Ron.
Back.
And here comes, I'm speaking before I'm clicking, Ray. Where's Ray at? There he is. Oops. Actually, Ray, can you raise your hand? Your virtual hand. He did not do this.
Gotta be specific.
Gotta be specific in this new world. All right. Questions. There are a lot. All right, we're going to start with Robert DiPietro, who had and Brent. I'm going to pose this one to you about Eric Flormonte's QBAB scores. Just content wise, are we looking at more articles or research into QBAB? And if you could even just give a very brief background of what Eric kind of was talking about in that piece.
Yeah, QBAB is a quality of contact metric that our one of our researchers, Eric Flormonte, developed this off season. We had an initial article with it where we discussed there was kind of leaderboards in there, and yes, we will very soon publish kind of the whole list, and I expect that to kind of be an ongoing point of reference that we'll use throughout the season. It was exciting research when we got it. It's great to have Eric do that for us, and it's something we want to continue to test and figure out how the best way is to incorporate it into our into kind of our standard toolbox. But yes, thanks for asking about that, and we will get that some additional content out on that soon.
Cool. All right, next up, I'm going to throw this one to Ron because Ron was making the case for volume early starters early in the cage match. This is Justin Verlander question from Tom Mulhall from Old Tom. Tom has the 5th pick in an upcoming 15-team draft, and it wants to take a hitter with that 5th pick. What are the chances Verlander falls to that kind of mid to late 2nd round in drafts, and would you take him there, Ron, given kind of what we've heard the last week or so?
Yeah, no, it's very likely he'll drop to that point. And he might even drop further. From my perspective, I would not take him there. I mean, if you remember, even before he got hurt, we were always a little bit concerned about his advanced age and the fact that, at this point in the player's career, pitcher's career, we might start to see some decline in skills. But add in this whole injury situation, and for me, it's just too many red flags. I would probably stay away from him. Just look past him towards somebody else. It's not somebody who I would take a chance on at this point.
In general, just real quick, would you look at bumping up other pitchers at that point, or would you just pound hitting, given just the rash of injuries in the starting pitcher pool?
Yeah, I would pound hitting. There were a lot of pitchers in the round 6 through 8, even as deep as round 10 that can anchor a staff. If Luis Castillo, I wouldn't mind having to be an anchor, and I mean, there are a lot of pitchers out there.
Cool. This next one from Craig, I will actually take, since I just kind of wrote this in my speculator column about the spring training ball. Any early returns in spring training as to whether the 2019 ball is still in play, or is it a lesser orb this year? I like that. I mentioned a little bit earlier that the general feedback from pitchers is that the ball, they can grip it a lot better than they could the regular season ball last year. I just don't think we know whether the spring training ball is going to be the same as the regular season ball. And this question was kind of hinted at last week as well. And Ron answered it with, we really won't know what that ball is going to be, no matter what it is in spring training until a couple weeks into 2020. So it's that elephant in the room that is very tough to answer. All right, let's see. All right, Brent, throw this one back to you, and then Ray will get you with the next one. Given the lack of 200-inning starters, so this is what kind of going back to that cage match, you recommend more of a stars and scrubs strategy with pitching, or more of a spread the wealth, kind of spread your risk and take kind of those more middle rounds, or in an auction kind of gobble up those $10 to $15 pitchers as opposed to stars and scrubs?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was arguing this earlier. Kind of if you obviously we all want the safest players, But if you're in a situation, given given the spot of the draft you're in, where you need to kind of take a chance on Snell as your top guy, or Clevenger or one of these other guys, just that I think if that's the case, I would then in those middle rounds kind of then stack up kind of in those second tier guys, to kind of hedge that way a little bit. And if they end up pitching more innings than what we have them projected for, or what the other pundits kind of have them projected for, I think then you're ahead.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And there's so many ways to build that rotation. It's a lot of ways to do it. So we actually had the same question from Jacob, who asked the same thing. So I won't pull that up. We kind of two birds with one stone with that one. All right, next question. This is from Mark Evans. And Ray, I'm going to throw this to you. And this might be putting all of us on the spot. Since we have had this live session, the NBA has announced that their season is suspended.
Yeah, I just saw that.
I saw that too.
And so Mark asked the question, we can't forecast what's going to happen in MLB. That's not really Mark's question, but given the possibility of either maybe a suspended season, I don't know, or just games being played in Arizona or other cities, just from a general draft strategy, is that possibility, Ray, is that possibility of changes affecting your draft strategy at all? Have you thought about that yet leading up to main event solo shot drafts this weekend?
Well, this is the problem. I'm drafting against you this weekend. So
that's why I brought you up here, man.
Yeah, it's interesting. Having had all of 12 minutes to think about this, I don't think it would affect my strategy. Ryan, I think you and I both saw a question on the site earlier this afternoon, even before the NBA news, about Seattle specifically, and would you change anything if you knew that Seattle was going to play their first homestand in Peoria, for instance, just because that park's a launch pad? And now you can extrapolate that whole question to, the entire league, maybe, right? I don't know what they're going to do, but if you figure they don't want to cancel games, maybe keeping the teams in Arizona and Florida without fans as a way to minimize the travel and that sort of thing. I don't know. I don't see anything I can do drafting this weekend to place a bet on that, so to speak. I guess if there's an angle to be played, if you really think that's what's going to happen, it pushes more value back to Verlander and Sale and the pitchers who are broken, because if they're out the month of April and we lose half of April if everybody loses half of April, Verlander's relative value comes back up. I guess that's one possible take, but do I want to bet my NFBC draft on, what they're going to decide to do this weekend? Not really.
Yeah. Brenda, Ron, anything to add or still processing that info?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Giving any player a chance to rehab and recover from many of these spring injuries or off-season injuries, any extra time is going to increase the possibility that they're going to do better during the regular season.
Yeah. And here we thought the Astros, cheating thing was going to be the big story that we're going to have to deal with, right?
Someone on Twitter just said there's been a year's worth of news in the last 4 hours, and they're completely right.
Really.
Yeah, really.
Absolutely. It's crazy times, and I think just to even try and guess what's going to happen at this point is, I think you're wasting your time. But at least, consider the possibilities. No one really knows the answer right now.
But the central. You're right. Nobody knows the answer. But the central point is, we joke about how much news has happened in the last 4 hours or in the last 4 days, and we're still 15 days away from opening day, which is an absolute eternity in the current environment. The problems that we're talking about tonight are going to be orders of magnitude different in 15 days.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a great point. This time last week, not going to New York City was not even a thought.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Next question here on metrics, and so many advanced metrics out there. Ron, I'm going to toss this to you with your BAB system and simplicity. Craig here asks, with all that information out there, it's almost paralysis by analysis. There's just so much information. Craig asks, what are rank your top 3 metrics that you use? And I'll kind of frame that a different way. I mean, how do you decipher from all of that information to put into a draft plan?
Yeah, there is a ton of advanced metrics out there. The StatCast stuff, I think we don't really have a full handle on yet as far as their projectability. It's more descriptive than projective. The old standbys, that's one of the things that I do with the broad assessment balance sheet is that we try to assess player skill in terms of ranges of skill, ranges of ability, because the precision that we're looking for it's difficult to project, and our accuracy is just awful on it. So I don't know if there's any specific gauges that I would look at more than others. Just even the basics: strikeout to walk rate, contact rate. I mean, things like that talk about the basic skills that players exhibit is a fine start. It really tells a great story, and not in such precise terms that you can nail it to a specific projection of how many home runs or how many hits or what have you. But really, that's the best we can do.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. You can almost, I think, Ron, you put out an article on this in The Athletic either last year or maybe this year as well, but making a case against every first rounder. With the number of information out there, you can almost make, and I do this in the speculator all the time with a range of outcomes, you can almost make a case for and against anybody. So it's interesting. And kind of going back to Babs, that's why you're weighing those skills and risk factors as well. So
right. I mean, the article I've written actually both the last 2 years is called "Here's What's Wrong with Everybody," and it goes through it goes through the top 15 picks on the ADPs, and every single one of those players has a certain type of baggage or warts or something that could completely derail him. I've recently written about Ronald Acuna, who is like the number 1 pick. But you take a look at his breakdown month by month last year. He only batted .233 in September. His contact rate declined each of the last 3 months of the season last year. And take a look what he's doing this spring. He's batting under like 100, I think. So, shades of Jose Ramirez a year ago at this time. So just be a little careful.
Yep. All right, we'll pivot. Brent, I'm going to throw you up here. Dynasty question.
Yep.
Adley Rutschman, Julio Rodriguez of Seattle, and Andrew Vaughn. More of a question on, will these guys be up this year? Are you hearing, will one of those guys be up before the other? Between Rutschman, Julio, and Vaughn, what are you thinking there for Dynasty?
I would think that Vaughn would be the most likely of the three. Very polished, top 3 pick from college last year. The problem or the downside with him is that the situation would have to change, obviously, in Chicago with them re-signing Jose Abreu and bringing in Encarnacion. Certainly, at least one of those guys would need to be injured or otherwise unavailable for Vaughn to come in as a first baseman. The other two are still are very high impact players, as Vaughn is. Rutschman, of course, was the number 1 pick last year, but as a catcher, it takes a little bit more time to acclimate themselves, and when they do get up, they're getting used to the pitching staffs and all that. He got up to high A, I believe, at the very end of last year. He'll probably either start high A or double A this year. Could be, if things go perfectly, could be like a September call up or an October call up if the season gets changed or something. And Rodriguez, I think there's the things I've heard about him makes me believe that that there's out of all, you kind of look for these sort of Juan Soto possible players. And I think that it's always a low it's always a low possibility. I mean, those are very, 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 very rare. But he could be one that could come up and have an impact. But I just think it's more unlikely because he just got to high A last year. He's young and terribly athletic, and it's just you don't want to count on those guys. So out of those three, I think Vaughn would be the kind of the easy one, most likely to come up and have some impact. They're all good long term, but we may see Vaughn. But again, it would sort of be circumstantial depending on the White Sox.
Yeah, and always team context. You never know when injuries or a need will come up, and that stuff's real hard to predict. So, cool, good stuff. We got two more questions here, and then we'll shut it down for the night. I'll take this next one. It's about Trey Mancini. Is he undraftable until we receive any more information about Mancini's situation? And one of you three guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I have not heard if the Orioles have been very kind of coy and quiet about it, which doesn't sound good for Mancini personally. I'm not sure what the why he's out, but it didn't sound good. So I don't know if any of you guys had any more information on that, but that's the last that I heard.
Yeah, and other than hearing, he was very upfront about needing the extra time.
Yeah.
And very without disclosing anything. So it's difficult to know in that situation. It's just difficult to know. I think I wouldn't call him undraftable. I mean, we're still drafting Puig at some point. Who's again a talented guy that's going to land somewhere. You have to believe, but it does give you some pause, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, there's certainly got to be pause, but if we don't know anything, which is obviously completely fine, that it's not a priority at this point for Mancini to tell us what's wrong. But I think then you can play out several different categories of what it might be. And there's roughly there's the Carlos Carrasco track where it's some kind of illness that has literally months of treatment or something like that. We're not going to see him. I think another possible track is more like the Kenley Jansen track, where he's got some medical thing where a procedure gets done that he can come back, relatively quickly once it's addressed. There's multiple things in each category, but as long as we don't know what category it is, I think to Brent's point, he's not totally undraftable, because I wouldn't rule out that he's ready to go fairly soon, because we don't know either way, really.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last one, Ray. I'm going to keep you on stage here, but this one's a softball. How soon can we get the speaker notes for tonight?
Here, I'll make you a deal. I think the video takes a little bit of prep time, but I will put the speaker notes and the slide deck up on the website within 5 minutes.
Wow.
Ooh.
Good answer.
Wow.
Video probably won't be until tomorrow morning, and the video will be for probably more relevant to the people who were not in the room anyway, but I'll put the speaker notes and slide deck up literally right now.
Cool. Sounds good. And so that'll wrap us up for tonight. I believe next Tuesday, right, is our third and final session.
It is indeed.
Yep. So more to come there, and we'll make that even more interactive and just try and get everyone's questions before that final weekend of draft day.
Yep.
So thanks again, guys. Really appreciate the insights and all the questions really from the attendees. You guys were active the whole time here. So great job.
Excellent.
Fun stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.